I never thought my biggest enemy would be a woman named Brenda Cartwright, who wore too much leopard print and lived 3 houses down from mine in Snowmass Village, Colorado. The day she banned my propane delivery was the day I decided some battles are worth fighting, even if it means watching your neighbors freeze. Let me back up. My name is Valdez, and I had moved to this gated community in the Rockies about 18 months ago. The place was beautiful, tucked away in the mountains with views that made you forget how much the mortgage cost. I worked remotely as a software engineer, and the isolation was perfect for me. The only problem was that I needed propane to heat my home. The subdivision was older, built back when propane was more common, and about 20 of us in the back section of the neighborhood relied on it because natural gas lines had never been extended to our part of the development. Everything was fine until Brenda took over as the HOA president last spring. She was one of those middle-aged women who treated the homeowners association like it was a Fortune 500 company, and she was the CEO. Every rule mattered. Every blade of grass needed to be the right height. Every mailbox had to face exactly the right direction. I had gotten a violation notice once because my trash can was visible from the street for more than 12 hours. 12 hours. She had apparently driven by, noted the time, and come back to verify. But I kept my head down, paid my dues, and tried to stay off her radar. That worked until October when she called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss what she called a safety concern. I showed up to the community center along with about 30 other homeowners, wondering what disaster had prompted this gathering. The meeting room smelled like old coffee, and the heating system rattled in the walls. Brenda stood at the front in a leopard print blazer that probably cost more than my monthly propane bill. Her blonde hair was styled in that harsh bob that seemed to be mandatory for women in positions of minor power. She cleared her throat and tapped the microphone, even though the room was small enough that she did not need it. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I have called this meeting because I have become aware of a serious safety issue affecting our community. Several homes in the back section of our neighborhood are receiving propane deliveries, and these large trucks are creating wear and tear on our roads, not to mention the potential danger of having explosive materials transported through our family-friendly neighborhood." I felt my stomach drop. I raised my hand. "Brenda, those of us in the back section do not have natural gas lines. We need propane to heat our homes. It has been this way since the neighborhood was built." She looked at me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I understand that, Isaac. However, times change and we need to modernize. I am proposing that the HOA implement a new rule banning the delivery of propane within our community boundaries. Those affected will need to find alternative heating solutions." An older man named George, who lived 2 houses down from me, stood up. "Alternative solutions? Lady, do you know what it would cost to convert our homes to electric heat, or to run natural gas lines back there? We are talking tens of thousands of dollars per house." "I appreciate your concern, George," Brenda said, her tone suggesting she appreciated nothing of the sort. "But the safety and property values of this community must come first. The wear on our roads from these heavy trucks is significant, and I have consulted with our insurance provider, who expressed concerns about liability." "Did the insurance company actually say they would not cover us, or are you just interpreting their concerns in a way that suits your agenda?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Her face flushed. "I do not appreciate your tone, Isaac. I am trying to protect this community. You are trying to force 20 households to spend a fortune to suit your preferences," I shot back. This is ridiculous. The meeting devolved from there. Brenda called for a vote, which felt illegal since not everyone in the affected group was present, and she had given us barely any notice. The vote passed by a slim margin, mostly because the people who voted yes were not the ones who would be affected. They lived in the front section with natural gas, and they seemed to buy into Brenda's fear, mongering about propane trucks damaging the precious asphalt. I left that meeting furious. When I got home, I immediately started researching Colorado HOA laws. I spent hours reading statutes and case law, learning about what HOAs could and could not do. What I found was interesting. While HOAs in Colorado have broad powers, they cannot implement rules that make it impossible for homeowners to use their properties for their intended purpose. Banning our only source of heat seemed like it might cross that line. I drafted a letter citing the relevant statutes and sent it to the HOA board, copying all the other affected homeowners. I explained that we would continue to receive propane deliveries and that we believed the new rule was unenforceable. I was polite but firm. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I got a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a notice that I was in violation of community rules and that any future propane deliveries would result in fines of $500 per incident. They also claimed they would have any propane trucks towed if they entered the community. I called my propane company, Rocky Mountain Propane, and explained the situation to the dispatcher. Her name was Rita, and she had been handling my account since I moved in. "So they are saying they will tow our trucks?" she asked, sounding incredulous. "That is what they are claiming," I said. "I do not think they can legally do that, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Honey, we deal with difficult HOAs all the time, but this is a new one. Let me talk to my manager and our legal team. We will figure something out." In the meantime, I contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. His name was Mark Patterson, and his office was down in Aspen. I drove down for a consultation, winding through the mountain roads as the aspens were turning gold and orange. Mark was in his 50s, with gray hair and a weathered face that suggested he spent his free time hiking. His office was cluttered with files and had a view of the mountains that probably cost him a fortune in rent. "So they are trying to ban propane deliveries," he said, leaning back in his chair after I explained the situation. "That is bold and probably illegal." "That is what I thought," I said. "But how do I fight it? I cannot just ignore the fines, can I?" "You can fight the fines, but it will take time and money. The better option might be to force their hand, get documentation of everything. When is your next delivery scheduled?" "In about 3 weeks. I usually get a fill-up before winter really hits." "Perfect." "When they try to block it or fine you, document everything. Photos, videos, written communications. Then we file an injunction. We can also file a complaint with the Colorado HOA office, though that process can be slow. The key is to make this more expensive and troublesome for them than it is worth." I left his office feeling slightly better. At least I had a plan. I paid his retainer fee, which made my bank account hurt, and drove back up the mountain to Snowmass Village. The next few weeks were tense. I received 2 more certified letters from the HOA, each one more threatening than the last. Brenda also took to driving past my house frequently, as if she expected to catch me in some violation. I made sure my lawn was perfect, my trash cans were hidden, and everything was by the book. My propane delivery was scheduled for November 15th. I called Rita a few days before to confirm. "We are still coming," she said. "Our legal team says the HOA cannot legally block us from making deliveries to your property. If they try to tow our truck, we will call the police." "Are you sure you want to deal with this hassle?" I asked. "I can try to find another company." "Isaac, this is the principle of the thing now. We are not going to let some power-hungry HOA president tell us we cannot serve our customers. Besides, you have been a great client. We are not abandoning you." I felt grateful but also nervous. I did not want Rita or her driver to get caught in the crossfire of this stupid dispute. November 15th arrived with clear skies and cold temperatures. I worked from home, keeping an eye out the window for the propane truck. It usually arrived mid-morning. Sure enough, around 10:30, I saw the familiar white truck with the Rocky Mountain Propane logo turning onto my street. I also saw Brenda's black Mercedes following close behind. I grabbed my phone and started recording video as I walked outside. The propane truck pulled into my driveway, and the driver, a guy named Tom who I had met a few times, climbed out with a wave. He was a big guy with a bushy beard and a friendly demeanor. "Morning, Isaac," he said. "Here we might have some trouble today." "Might," I agreed, watching as Brenda parked her Mercedes across the end of my driveway, blocking the propane truck from leaving. She climbed out wearing a puffy jacket over her usual leopard print, her face set in righteous anger. "You need to leave immediately," she announced, pointing at Tom. "Propane deliveries are banned in this community." Tom looked at her calmly. "Madam, I have a legal right to make deliveries to this customer. He has a contract with our company, and he needs propane to heat his home. I do not care about your contract. This is private property, and you are trespassing. Leave now, or I will call the police and have your truck towed." "Go ahead and call the police," Tom said. "I would love to hear what they have to say about you blocking my legal delivery." Brenda's face turned red. She pulled out her phone and actually called 911. I kept recording, making sure to capture everything. This was going to be good. Within 15 minutes, a sheriff's deputy arrived. Snowmass Village was a small community, and we shared law enforcement with the rest of Pitkin County. The deputy was a young guy named Officer Martin, and he looked confused as he surveyed the scene. "So what seems to be the problem?" he asked. Brenda immediately launched into her explanation. "This truck is trespassing on private HOA property. We have rules against propane deliveries, and this driver is refusing to leave." Officer Martin turned to Tom. "Is this your truck?" "Yes, sir. I am making a scheduled delivery to Mr. Valdez here. He is my customer and has every legal right to receive propane." The deputy looked at me. "Is this your property?" "Yes. I own this house and I need propane for heat. The HOA is trying to ban deliveries, but I do not believe they have the legal right to do that." Officer Martin rubbed his forehead. "This sounds like a civil dispute, not a criminal matter." "Madam, you cannot call 911 for HOA violations. That is not what emergency services are for." "But he is trespassing," Brenda insisted. "He is making a delivery to a customer on that customer's property. That is not trespassing. And you are currently blocking his vehicle, which could arguably be unlawful restraint." Brenda looked like she had been slapped. "Are you threatening to arrest me?" "I am asking you to move your vehicle so this man can complete his job. If you have an issue with the HOA rules, that is a civil matter you need to resolve through proper channels, not by blocking vehicles and calling 911. I had to suppress a smile. This was better than I could have hoped. Brenda sputtered for a moment, then stormed back to her Mercedes and moved it, tires squealing as she backed up. She did not leave, though. She parked on the street and sat there, glaring at us as Tom completed the propane delivery. Officer Martin stuck around until the delivery was done, probably to make sure Brenda did not try anything else. When Tom was finished, I signed the delivery receipt and thanked him. "All in a day's work," Tom said cheerfully, though this was definitely more exciting than usual. After everyone left, I uploaded the video to my computer and sent a copy to Mark Patterson. He called me back within an hour, laughing. "This is perfect. The police deputy basically confirmed that you have every right to receive deliveries. I am going to send a letter to the HOA citing this incident and demanding they cease their harassment. If they continue, we will file for an injunction and possibly pursue a harassment claim." "How much is this going to cost me?" I asked. "Let's see how they respond to the letter first." Sometimes these things resolve themselves once people realize they are in the wrong. But I knew Brenda better than that. She was not the type to admit she was wrong. Sure enough, 3 days later, I received another certified letter. This one informed me that I was being fined $500 for the propane delivery, and that the HOA was placing a lien on my property for unpaid fines. They also stated that any future violations would result in additional fines and potential legal action to force the sale of my home. I forwarded it all to Mark, feeling my blood pressure rise. This was insane. They were actually threatening to force me to sell my house because I needed propane to heat it. Mark filed an emergency injunction with the Pitkin County District Court, asking the judge to prohibit the HOA from enforcing the propane ban and to remove the lien from my property. The hearing was scheduled for early December. In the meantime, the weather started to turn. Colorado mountain winters are no joke, and by late November we were getting regular snow. Nothing major yet, but enough to remind everyone that the serious cold was coming. I noticed that Brenda had doubled down on her campaign. She was going around to other homeowners, trying to drum up support for the propane ban. She even held another HOA meeting, which I attended along with the other affected homeowners. This meeting was more heated than the first. George stood up and gave an impassioned speech about how he was a veteran on a fixed income and could not afford to convert his heating system. A woman named Patricia who lived next to me explained that she was a single mother and the fines would bankrupt her. But Brenda was unmoved. "These sob stories do not change the facts," she said coldly. "Propane deliveries are dangerous and damage our roads. If you cannot afford to live here under our community standards, perhaps you should consider moving somewhere more suitable to your circumstances." The room went silent. Even the people who had voted for the ban seemed shocked by her callousness. "You are unbelievable," I said, standing up. "You are willing to force people out of their homes over a rule that serves no purpose except to satisfy your power trip. This is not about safety or roads. This is about you wanting control. Sit down, Mr. Valdez, or I will have you removed from this meeting," Brenda snapped. "This is a community meeting. You cannot have me removed for speaking. I am the president of this HOA, and I decide who gets to speak." Actually, according to the Colorado HOA statutes, all homeowners have the right to speak at community meetings. But go ahead and try to have me removed. I will just add it to the list of violations we are presenting to the judge. Brenda's face went purple, but she did not respond. The meeting ended shortly after, with nothing resolved. The court hearing was scheduled for December 10th. Mark and I prepared our case, gathering documentation of everything the HOA had done. We had photos, videos, copies of all the threatening letters, the police report from Officer Martin's visit, and testimonies from other affected homeowners. The hearing took place in the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen. The courtroom was small and wood-paneled, with high windows that let in the winter light. Brenda showed up with a lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit named Richard Newhouse, who apparently specialized in HOA cases. Judge Margaret Klein presided. She was in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened as both sides presented their arguments. Mark went first, laying out our case clearly. Your Honor, the HOA is attempting to enforce a rule that effectively makes it impossible for my client and 19 other homeowners to heat their homes. These properties were built with propane as the intended heating source, and there are no natural gas lines available. The HOA's rule is not only unreasonable but potentially illegal under Colorado statute, which prevents HOAs from implementing rules that prevent homeowners from using their properties for their intended purpose. Richard Newhouse countered. Your Honor, HOAs have broad discretion to implement rules that protect property values and ensure community safety. The propane delivery trucks are large commercial vehicles that cause wear and tear on private roads maintained by the HOA. The HOA has a duty to protect the interests of all homeowners, not just the 20 who use propane. Judge Klein interrupted him. Counselor, what alternative heating solutions has the HOA provided for the affected homeowners? Richard hesitated. The homeowners are free to convert to electric heat or other alternatives, at their own expense. Yes, Your Honor. And the cost of such a conversion, that would vary by property but likely between $15,000 and $30,000 per home. Judge Klein looked at him over her reading glasses. So the HOA is demanding that 20 homeowners spend upwards of $500,000 collectively to comply with a rule that was not in place when they purchased their properties. The HOA has the authority to implement new rules as needed, not rules that are unreasonable or that violate state law. She turned to Mark. Do you have evidence that the propane deliveries do not pose a significant safety risk? Mark nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We have testimony from the propane company about their safety record, documentation showing that propane delivery is a common and safe practice, and a statement from a structural engineer about the minimal impact of delivery trucks on the roads in question. Judge Klein reviewed the documents for several minutes. The courtroom was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, she looked up. I am issuing a preliminary injunction. The HOA is prohibited from enforcing the propane delivery ban, or from imposing fines related to propane deliveries, pending a full hearing on the merits. The lien on Mr. Valdez's property is to be removed immediately. Furthermore, I am ordering both parties to engage in mediation to find a reasonable solution to this dispute. I felt a wave of relief. It was not a complete victory, but it was enough to get the HOA off my back for now. Outside the courthouse, Brenda marched past without looking at me, her lawyer hurrying to keep up. Mark clapped me on the shoulder. Good start, he said. The mediation will be interesting, but at least you can get your deliveries now without harassment. Thank you, I said. I appreciate everything you have done. Just keep documenting everything. Something tells me Miss Cartwright is not done yet. He was right about that. The mediation was scheduled for early January, but before we could get there, winter arrived with a vengeance. The weather forecasters had been tracking a massive storm system moving down from Canada, and by mid-December, it was clear we were in for a serious blizzard. I made sure to get a propane delivery in early December, right after the injunction. Tom came out and filled my tank to capacity, and I felt secure knowing I had plenty of fuel to get through whatever winter threw at us. The storm hit on December 18th. It started as light snow in the morning, but by afternoon it was a full whiteout. The wind howled through the mountains, piling snow into massive drifts. The temperature plummeted to well below zero. I hunkered down inside, grateful for my propane heat. I worked from my home office, listening to the storm rage outside and checking the weather reports. The forecasters were calling it a once-in-a-decade storm. Some areas were expected to get over 4 feet of snow, and the cold snap was predicted to last at least a week. On the second day of the storm, my power went out. This was not uncommon in mountain blizzards. The heavy snow brought down power lines, and it could take days for crews to restore service. But I was prepared. My propane generator kicked on automatically, providing backup power. More importantly, my propane heater kept running. I was warm and comfortable while the blizzard raged. I thought about Brenda and the other homeowners in the front section who had natural gas. They would be fine for heat, but without power, they would probably be less comfortable. I did not wish them any real harm, but I admit I felt a certain satisfaction knowing that my banned propane was keeping me perfectly comfortable. On the third day of the storm, my phone rang. It was George. "Isaac, are you doing okay over there?" he asked. "Yeah, I am fine. Got power from my generator and plenty of heat. You?" "Same, but I just got a call from Patricia. Apparently, there is a problem in the front section. The natural gas pressure is dropping." "What do you mean dropping?" "The gas company uses electric pumps to maintain pressure in the lines. With the power out and the extreme cold, something is going wrong. People in the front section are starting to lose their heat." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." And get this, Brenda called Patricia asking if she knew anyone who could help. Patricia told her to go pound sand. I should have felt smug. Karma was certainly having a moment, but mostly I just felt concerned. This was dangerous weather to be without heat. "Has anyone called the gas company?" I asked. "I am sure they have, but in this storm, it could be days before they can get out here to fix anything. The roads are completely impassable." I hung up and looked out my window at the wall of white. George was right. Nobody was going anywhere in this weather. The snowplows could not keep up, and visibility was nearly zero. Over the next few hours, I got several more calls from neighbors. The situation in the front section was deteriorating. Without heat, homes were cooling rapidly in the sub-zero temperatures. People were bundling up in every piece of clothing they owned and huddling under blankets. Some had fireplaces, but not everyone, and firewood was in short supply. Then Brenda called me. I stared at my phone for a moment, debating whether to answer. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. "Hello." "Isaac, this is Brenda Cartwright." Her voice was stiff, formal. "I am calling because we have a situation in the community." I heard, natural gas pressure issues. "Yes, the gas company says they cannot get crews out here until the storm clears. That could be several more days. Some of our residents are in danger of hypothermia." I waited. I was not going to make this easy for her. "I am calling to ask if you have any spare propane heaters or if you know where we might obtain some." "Brenda, you banned propane deliveries. This is an emergency situation, Isaac. People could die." "You are right, it is an emergency, and if you had not banned propane deliveries, those people would have backup heating options. Several of them could have had propane installed as a secondary system." "Are you really going to lecture me right now? People are freezing." I took a deep breath. As much as I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her, people's lives were potentially at risk. "I have one small portable propane heater that I keep for emergencies, but it is not enough to heat even one house properly, let alone multiple homes. And I cannot give you my propane because I need it for my own heat and generator." "What about your neighbors, the ones with propane? You mean the people you were trying to fine and force out of the neighborhood? I am sure they are just thrilled to help you out right now." Brenda was silent for a moment. "I understand you are angry, but please, can you at least ask them?" "I will ask, but I am not making any promises." "You made this bed, Brenda." I hung up and immediately called George and Patricia. George laughed bitterly when I explained what Brenda wanted. She has got some nerve. After everything she has put us through, now she wants our help. People are cold, George. Do you have anything you can spare? He sighed. I have a small portable heater. I suppose I could lend it out. But someone has to come get it, and they better bring it back when this is over. Patricia was less charitable. I have 2 kids to keep warm, Isaac. I am not giving up anything. Brenda can freeze for all I care. I could not really blame her. I called the other affected homeowners and got similar responses. Most were willing to lend a small heater if absolutely necessary, but nobody was feeling particularly generous given how they had been treated. I called Brenda back and gave her the news. George has a portable heater you can borrow. He lives at 847 Aspen Ridge Drive. You will have to go get it yourself because nobody is driving in this weather. That is 3 streets away. I cannot walk in this storm. Then I guess you will have to make do without it. That is the best I can do. She hung up without another word. Over the next day, the situation got worse. The temperature dropped to 15 below zero, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. I got a call from Officer Martin, the sheriff's deputy from the propane delivery incident. Mr. Valdez, I am calling residents in the Snowmass Village area to check on welfare. Are you doing okay? I am fine, officer. I have heat and power from my propane system. That is good to hear. I am getting reports of people in your neighborhood without heat. Do you know anything about that? I explained the natural gas situation. Officer Martin sighed heavily. I have been in contact with the gas company. They are trying to get emergency crews out, but the roads are impassable right now. Is there any way to get temporary heat to the affected residents? The HOA banned propane deliveries a few months ago. Those of us who fought the ban have propane, but the people who supported the ban do not. There are some portable heaters available, but not enough for everyone. The HOA banned propane during a Colorado winter. That seems monumentally stupid. You will get no argument from me, officer. All right, I will see what I can do. If anyone is in immediate danger, call 911. We will try to get emergency services out even in this weather. After I hung up, I checked the neighborhood social media page. It was full of panicked posts from people in the front section. One woman had pipes that burst from the cold. A family with an infant was desperately trying to keep the baby warm. An elderly man with health issues was running out of his medications because he needed to stay warm, and his pills were across town at a pharmacy. I felt genuinely bad for these people, but I also could not help thinking that this was entirely avoidable. If Brenda had not pushed her ridiculous propane ban, people would have had options. On the 4th day of the storm, emergency services managed to get a rescue vehicle into the neighborhood. They evacuated the most vulnerable residents, including the family with the baby and the elderly man with health issues. They also brought in some emergency supplies, including a few portable heaters and blankets, but it was not enough. There were over 100 homes in the front section, and maybe a dozen portable heaters available. People were rotating through warming stations set up in homes that had working fireplaces, but it was cold, miserable, and dangerous. Brenda's house, I learned from the social media posts, was one of those without a fireplace. She was holed up with a neighbor, wrapped in blankets and seething with anger if the posts were any indication. Someone had shared a screenshot of a text message she had sent to the HOA board, blaming the gas company, the county, the weather service, and basically everyone except herself for the situation. The storm finally broke on the 5th day. The snow stopped, the sun came out, and the temperature rose to a balmy 10 degrees above zero. Snowplows began clearing the roads, and the gas company got crews out to fix the pressure issue. By that evening, natural gas service was restored to the front section. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. The crisis was over. People had survived, though there was property damage and a lot of anger floating around. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. The HOA would drop the propane ban. Everyone would move on and life would return to normal. I was wrong. 2 days after the storm cleared, Brenda called an emergency HOA meeting. I almost did not go, but curiosity got the better of me. I drove to the community center, noting the massive piles of snow that lined every street. The meeting room was packed. Pretty much everyone in the neighborhood showed up, either because they had suffered through the storm without heat or because they wanted to see what would happen next. Brenda stood at the front, looking haggard. Her usual perfect hair and makeup were replaced with dark circles under her eyes and a defensive set to her jaw. But her leopard print blazer was back, which told me she was ready for battle. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "As you know, we experienced an unprecedented natural disaster last week. Many of our residents suffered without heat due to a failure by the natural gas company to maintain service." "That is not what happened, and you know it," someone shouted from the back. Brenda ignored them. "I am proposing that we pursue legal action against the gas company for their failure to provide services during the emergency. We should also be exploring backup power solutions for the community." "How about you drop the propane ban?" George called out. "The people with propane were fine during the storm." "The propane ban is still necessary for road maintenance and community safety," Brenda said stubbornly. The room erupted. People were shouting, some in support of dropping the ban, others just venting their frustration about the whole situation. It was chaos. I stood up and the room gradually quieted. "Brenda, you nearly got people killed because of your ego. The propane ban was never about safety or roads. It was about control. And when your control failed, you called the very people you were trying to punish and asked for help. The answer is simple. Drop the ban, apologize, and move on." "I will not apologize for trying to protect this community," she snapped. "You were not protecting anyone. You were on a power trip and it backfired spectacularly." Another board member, a man named Dennis who usually went along with whatever Brenda wanted, stood up. "Brenda, I think we need to reconsider this. The storm showed that propane is actually a valuable backup option. Maybe we should be encouraging it, not banning it." "Absolutely not," Brenda said. "We voted on this." "Then we can vote again," Dennis said. "I move that we rescind the propane delivery ban." "I second," George said immediately. Brenda looked panicked. "We cannot vote on this without proper notice to all homeowners." "We are all here," Dennis pointed out. "This is as much notice as anyone could need." The vote was taken by show of hands. It was not even close. The propane ban was rescinded by a margin of at least 3-1. Brenda stood at the front, her face red with fury and humiliation. "Fine. But I want it on the record that I voted against this and that any future problems with propane deliveries will be your responsibility." "Noted," Dennis said dryly. "Is there any other business?" "Yes," said a woman named Karen Foster who lived in the front section. "I move that we recall Brenda Cartwright as HOA president for gross negligence and endangering residents." I almost laughed. Of course, there was another Karen in the neighborhood, and of course she was the one to call for Brenda's removal. "You cannot do that," Brenda sputtered. "Actually, according to our bylaws, we can," Karen said. She was a lawyer and apparently knew her stuff. "Any homeowner can petition for a recall vote if they can get 20% of residents to sign the petition. I happen to have signatures from 30% right here." She held up a thick sheaf of papers. Brenda looked like she might faint. The recall vote was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip and drama. Brenda stopped leaving her house except to check her mail. I almost felt bad for her, but then I remembered her threat to force me to sell my home and the feeling passed. The recall vote was held on January 5th. It was not even close. Brenda was removed as HOA president by an overwhelming majority. Dennis was elected as the interim president until regular elections could be held in the spring. Brenda did not take it well. She showed up at the meeting where the results were announced and gave a rambling speech about how the community did not appreciate her sacrifices and how everyone would regret this decision. Then she stormed out and no one heard from her for weeks. With Brenda gone, the mediation that the judge had ordered became almost unnecessary. Dennis and the new HOA board immediately agreed to not only allow propane deliveries, but to encourage them as a backup heating option. They even explored the possibility of the HOA subsidizing propane installation for homeowners who wanted it as a secondary system. Mark Patterson helped me file a claim against the HOA for my legal expenses. The board settled quickly, reimbursing me for my attorney fees and formally apologizing for the harassment. They also removed all the fines from my account and compensated me for my time and stress. I got a call from Rita at Rocky Mountain Propane. I heard the good news. Congratulations on winning your war with the HOA. Thanks, Rita, and thank you for standing by me through all of this. Of course, we are actually getting calls from other homeowners in your neighborhood now wanting to set up propane service. This whole mess turned out to be good for business. I laughed, glad something good came out of it. Life returned to normal over the next few months. Winter continued with more snow but no more emergencies. My propane deliveries came without incident. The HOA under Dennis's leadership was reasonable and focused on actual community issues rather than power games. I did see Brenda occasionally. She would drive past my house sometimes, and I swear she glared at me through her windshield. But she never stopped, never said anything. She had become a pariah in the neighborhood, and I heard through the grapevine that she was thinking about selling her house and moving. In March, I got an unexpected knock on my door. It was Officer Martin, the sheriff's deputy. "Mr. Valdez, do you have a few minutes?" he asked. "Of course, officer. What is this about?" "It is about Brenda Cartwright. She has been arrested." I stared at him. "Arrested for what?" "Embezzlement. Turns out she was skimming money from the HOA accounts, over $50,000 over the past 2 years. The new HOA board discovered it during an audit." I felt my jaw drop. "Are you kidding me?" I wish I was. "She used the money for personal expenses, luxury purchases, trips. She hid it pretty well, but not well enough. She has been charged with theft, embezzlement, and forgery. She will probably be going away for a while." After Officer Martin left, I sat down heavily on my couch. Brenda's crusade against propane deliveries suddenly made more sense. She had needed something to distract the community from looking too closely at the finances. She had created a controversy to keep everyone focused on anything but her own criminal activity. The legal proceedings against Brenda moved slowly but steadily. She tried to claim the charges were retaliation for her HOA leadership, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, forged signatures, transfers to her personal accounts. In the end, she pleaded guilty to reduce charges. In July, Brenda was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to repay the full amount she had stolen plus damages. Her house went up for sale to cover the restitution. I saw the moving trucks outside one day, watched as her belongings were loaded up, and felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. She had brought it all on herself, but it was still a dramatic fall. The new homeowners who bought Brenda's house were a nice young couple with a golden retriever. They introduced themselves to me one Saturday while I was mowing my lawn. "We heard there was some drama in the neighborhood before we moved in," the husband said. "Something about propane and the HOA," I laughed. "That is one way to put it, but it is all resolved now. Welcome to the neighborhood." As they walked back to their house, I looked up at the mountains surrounding our community. The aspens were green now, the winter storms long past. My propane tank sat beside my house, recently filled, ready for whatever the next winter might bring. I thought about everything that had happened. The threats, the fines, the court case, the blizzard, and finally the truth about Brenda's crimes. It had been exhausting and expensive, but I had stood my ground. I had refused to let a petty tyrant drive me out of my home or force me to make unreasonable changes. Sometimes the right thing to do is to fight back, to stand up to bullies even when it is difficult and costly. I had learned that lesson well. And I had learned that karma, while sometimes slow, tends to catch up with people eventually. My phone buzzed with a message from George. "Hey, propane delivery tomorrow. Want to grab a beer after and celebrate another winter's worth of heat?" I texted back. Absolutely. The neighborhood had healed. The HOA was functioning properly under reasonable leadership. My home was warm, my propane deliveries were uninterrupted, and Brenda Cartwright was facing the consequences of her actions. As I finished mowing my lawn, I smiled. The war with the HOA was over and I had won. But more than that, the community had won. We had rid ourselves of a corrupt leader and established reasonable rules that actually served homeowners rather than one person's ego. Winter would come again, as it always does in the Colorado mountains. The storms would blow, the snow would pile up, and temperatures would plummet. But I would be ready. My propane tank full, my generator maintained, my home secure. And if anyone ever tried to ban propane deliveries again, well, they would have to answer to the entire neighborhood of homeowners who now understood exactly why propane was not just convenient but essential. We had learned our lesson the hard way, watching Brenda and her supporters freeze while those of us with propane stayed warm and safe. The memory of that blizzard would stay with this community for years. It had become a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when HOA leaders prioritize power over people, ego over common sense. Parents would tell their kids about the time the HOA president banned propane and nearly froze the neighborhood. Realtors would mention it to prospective buyers as evidence that the community had learned from its mistakes. As for me, I had become something of a local legend. The guy who stood up to the HOA and won. People I barely knew would wave at me in the grocery store or stop to chat about their own HOA horror stories. I did not particularly enjoy the attention, but I appreciated the respect. Dennis, the new HOA president, had turned out to be excellent. He ran meetings efficiently, kept the focus on actual community maintenance issues, and consulted with homeowners before implementing new rules. Under his leadership, the HOA had repaved roads, updated the community center, and established a reserve fund that was transparently managed and regularly audited. The propane issue had sparked a broader conversation about HOA governance in Colorado. Mark Patterson told me that several other communities had reached out to him about similar disputes, and that lawmakers were considering legislation to prevent HOAs from banning essential services like heating fuel deliveries. In August, I got a letter from the Colorado HOA office. They had investigated the situation with Brenda and our community, and they were using it as a case study in their training materials for HOA board members. They asked if I would be willing to speak at a conference about my experience. I agreed, though public speaking was not my favorite activity. The conference was in Denver, and I drove down on a sunny September morning. The conference center was full of HOA board members from across the state, all there to learn about best practices and legal requirements. My presentation was titled, "When HOA Rules Go Wrong, a Case Study in Overreach and Consequences." I walked the audience through everything that had happened, from the initial ban to the court case to the blizzard to Brenda's arrest. People took notes, asked questions, and several came up afterward to thank me for sharing my story. "You probably saved a lot of homeowners from similar situations," one board president told me. "We were considering banning certain types of deliveries in our community, but after hearing your talk, we are going to reconsider and make sure we are not creating unintended problems." Driving back to Snowmass Village that evening, I felt a sense of closure. The fight with the HOA had taken nearly a year of my life, cost me thousands of dollars, and caused enormous stress. But it had also taught me about standing up for what is right, about community, and about the importance of reasonable governance. The leaves were starting to turn again as I pulled into my driveway. Another autumn, another winter approaching. But this time, there would be no drama about propane deliveries, no threatening letters, no fines, no confrontations with angry HOA presidents. Just the quiet confidence of knowing my home was secure, my heating fuel would arrive without incident, and my community had learned a valuable lesson about the difference between leadership and tyranny. I walked inside, made myself dinner, and settled in for the evening. Through my window, I could see the mountains turning pink and orange in the sunset. The propane tank beside my house gleamed in the fading light, a symbol of the battle I had fought and won. And somewhere, in a prison facility downstate, Brenda Cartwright was learning her own lessons about consequences and accountability. I did not take pleasure in her imprisonment, but I did not feel sorry for her either. She had made her choices, committed her crimes, and now she was facing the results. As for me, I was just a software engineer who wanted to heat his home in peace. I had never asked to be part of an HOA drama, never wanted to fight legal battles or become a cautionary tale. But when pushed, I had pushed back. And in the end, that made all the difference. The story could have ended differently. I could have given up, paid the fines, and spent tens of thousands of dollars converting my heating system just to comply with an unreasonable rule. Other homeowners in the affected group could have done the same, accepting Brenda's tyranny as the price of living in the neighborhood. But we did not. We stood together, fought back through legal means, and ultimately prevailed. And when the crisis came, when the blizzard hit and people needed help, those of us with propane were ready and willing to assist despite how we had been treated. That was the part of the story I was most proud of. Not the victory in court, not Brenda's downfall, but the fact that when it mattered, the community came together. George lent his heater even though he had every reason to refuse. Other homeowners offered what help they could. We did not let Brenda's vindictiveness turn us into vindictive people. The next winter arrived right on schedule. The first snow fell in late October, and by November we were well into the season. My propane tank was full, courtesy of a smooth, uneventful delivery from Rocky Mountain Propane. Tom had waved as he filled the tank, and we chatted about football and the early snow. No HOA president appeared to harass us. No threatening letters arrived in the mail. No drama, no stress, just a normal delivery of heating fuel like it should be. When the big storms hit in January, my home stayed warm and comfortable. My neighbors in the front section, having learned their lesson, had installed backup heating options. Several had added propane systems, Others had wood stoves, and everyone had emergency supplies ready. The community had grown stronger from the crisis. We looked out for each other more, communicated better, and took our HOA governance seriously. The days of rubber stamping whatever the president wanted were over. People paid attention, asked questions, and demanded transparency. In February, I got a call from Mark Patterson. "Isaac, I wanted to let you know that your case has been cited in a Colorado Court of Appeals decision. Another HOA tried to ban propane, and the homeowner used our case as precedent. The court ruled in favor of the homeowner." "That is great news," I said. "I am glad something good is coming out of all this for other people too. You set an important precedent. HOAs across the state are being more careful now about implementing rules that affect essential services. You should be proud." After we hung up, I sat at my desk and thought about the journey. From that first threatening letter to the court victory, to watching Brenda's downfall, to becoming an unexpected advocate for homeowner rights. It had been quite a ride, but mostly, I was just grateful to be back to normal. To work on my software projects without legal distractions. To enjoy my home in the mountains without conflicts with the HOA. To receive my propane deliveries in peace. The mountains outside my window were covered in snow, beautiful and serene. My heater hummed quietly, powered by the propane that had caused so much controversy. And life went on, better and more peaceful than it had been in a long time. That spring, the HOA held its regular elections. Dennis chose not to run for president, saying he had only agreed to serve temporarily during the crisis. A woman named Susan Martinez ran on a platform of transparent governance and community focus. She won easily. At her first meeting as president, Susan announced a new policy. Any rule changes that significantly affected homeowners would require extensive notice, community input sessions, and a 2/3 majority vote to pass. No more last-minute meetings with surprise votes on major issues. "We learned a hard lesson," Susan said. "This HOA exists to serve the community, not to rule over it. Going forward, we are going to make sure every homeowner has a voice." The room applauded. I looked around at my neighbors, at George and Patricia and Karen Foster and all the others who had been through the battle with me. We had won more than just the right to receive propane deliveries. We had won back our community from a petty tyrant and established a better way of governing ourselves. As I left the meeting that night, I ran into Dennis in the parking lot. "Thank you for everything you did," I told him. "Taking over as president during all that chaos could not have been easy." "Thank you for standing up to Brenda in the first place," he replied. "I should have done it myself long before things got so bad. You showed a lot of courage." We shook hands, and I drove home through the spring evening. The snow was melting, the trees were budding, and another Colorado winter was behind us. I never saw Brenda again. I heard she was released from prison after serving 18 months and moved somewhere out of state. Her name became synonymous in our community with HOA overreach and corruption, a warning tale told to new board members. As for me, I continued living in my house, working remotely and enjoying the mountain views. My propane deliveries came like clockwork. The HOA under Susan's leadership was professional and reasonable. Life was good. Sometimes on cold winter nights, I would stand by my window and look out at the snow, remembering that terrible blizzard when everything came to a head. I would think about Brenda sitting in her cold house, having banned the very resource that could have saved her. I would think about the justice of it all, how karma had worked in ways I never could have predicted. But mostly, I just felt grateful. Grateful for my warm home, for propane heat, for reasonable neighbors, and for the lesson that standing up for what is right, even when it is hard, is always worth it in the end. The story of the HOA versus Propane had reached its conclusion, not with a bang but with quiet resolution. The community had healed, the villain had faced justice, and normal life had resumed. It was exactly the ending it deserved, one where good sense prevailed and people learned from their mistakes. And every time Tom from Rocky Mountain Propane pulled up to fill my tank, I smiled and thought about how such a simple thing, heating fuel for my home, had become the center of such a dramatic saga. But it was over now, truly over, and I could finally just be a regular homeowner in a regular neighborhood, living my regular life. That was all I had ever wanted in the first place.